Good day, folks. Welcome to Bible Simplified. Today we do a Bible study on a very significant book in the Bible called the Book of Esther. This is an interesting story of how Queen Esther saved the Jews from the class of Haman, who wanted to get rid of and murder a community of Jews, who was living in the Persian Empire at the time. Stay tuned and watch this exciting story of God's purpose at work for His people. Esther chapter 1 and 2. Esther becomes queen. The story begins when the king of Persia, named Ahasuerus, throws 2 banquet feasts that last a total of 187 days, all for the grand purpose of displaying his greatness and splendor. On the last day of the feast, the king is drunk and demands that his wife, Queen Vashti, appear at the party to show off her beauty. She refuses, and, in a drunken rage, the king rejects Vashti and makes a silly decree that all Persian men should be the master of their own homes. Then the king holds a beauty pageant to find a new queen. And right when the story sounds bad already, we're introduced to Esther and Mordecai. Esther hides her Jewish identity and poses as a Persian, and she wins the pageant. The king is so obsessed with Esther that he elevates her as the new queen of Persia. After this, Mordecai overhears 2 royal guards plotting to murder the king. He informs Esther, who then tells the king, and Mordecai gets credit for saving the king's life. And in all these remarkable events, God is not mentioned, but it all seems so perfectly ordained. One may ask, what is God up to at this stage? Esther chapter 3 to 6. Haman's plot and Mordecai's rise to power. In the next part of the story, we're introduced to Haman, who's not a Persian but an Agagite, a descendant of the ancient Canaanites. The king elevates Haman to the highest position in the kingdom, and demands that all kneel before him. But when Mordecai sees Haman, he refuses to kneel. Haman is filled with rage. When Haman finds out that Mordecai is Jewish, he successfully persuades the king to introduce a decree to destroy all the Jews. They decide the date of this horrific day. Haman rolls ancient dice, and the decree is set. 11 months later, on the 13th of Adar, which is the festival of Purim, all the Jews will be executed. Haman and the king throw a party to celebrate the decree. After this, the story focuses on Mordecai and Esther, who are now the only hope for the Jewish people. They plan for Esther to reveal her Jewish identity to the king, and ask that he reverse the decree, but there's risk involved because approaching the king without a royal request was an act worthy of death, according to Persian law. At a crucial moment in the story, Mordecai asserts that if Esther remains silent, deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. Then he wonders aloud, who knows, maybe you've become queen for this very moment. Esther responds with bravery, if I perish, and she decides to approach the king. We then see an ironic reversal of all of Haman's evil plans. Esther hosts the king and Haman at a banquet, where she makes a special request that they both come to an even more exclusive banquet the next day. Haman leaves the feast quite drunk and happy with himself, and he sees Mordecai in the street. When Mordecai refuses to bow to Haman, he fumes with anger and orders that a tall stake be built, so that Mordecai can be pierced upon it in the morning. It seems things can't get any worse for the Jews or for Mordecai. But all of a sudden, the story changes. That night, the king can't sleep, so he has the royal chronicles read to him. He just happens to hear about how Mordecai saved his life from the plot of the guards. The king had totally forgotten about it. So in the morning, as Haman enters to request Mordecai's execution, the king orders Haman to honor Mordecai publicly for saving his life. Haman then has to lead Mordecai about the city on a royal horse. This reversal forms a turning point in the story, beginning with Haman's downfall and ending with Mordecai's rise to power. Esther chapter 7 to 8. Haman's demise and deliverance of the Jewish people. The next day, Esther hosts the second banquet and the king and Haman arrive, and Esther informs the king that she is Jewish. Then she reveals that Haman's decree is a ploy to murder her and Mordecai, the man who saved the king's life. After taking in a lot of wine and Esther's news, the king goes into a drunken rage. He orders that Haman be pierced on the stake that he made for Mordecai. But Haman's execution doesn't solve the problem of the decree to kill all the Jews. So the focus turns back to Mordecai and Esther as they plan to reverse the decree. When they discover that the king can't revoke a decree he's already made, Mordecai is commissioned to issue a counter-decree. On the day when all the Jewish people were to be killed, the Jews can now defend themselves and destroy any who plotted to kill them. After this, Mordecai, Esther, and Jewish people everywhere hold banquets and feasts to celebrate the new decree. Most surprising of all, Mordecai is elevated to a seat beside the king. Esther chapter 9-10. The triumph of the Jewish people. Eventually, the decreed day comes, and the Jews triumph over their enemies. First, they destroy Haman's family along with any other Persian officials who had joined Haman's plot. The next day, the Jewish people are allowed to destroy anyone who plotted against them. This is followed by great joy and celebration because the Jewish people have been rescued from destruction. The story then tells how Esther and Mordecai establish another decree. This great reversal and rescue will be remembered by an annual 2-day feast called Purim, which is a Jewish holiday that celebrates the survival of the Jewish people from persecution in the ancient Persian Empire. Mordecai is elevated to second in command in the kingdom, and we're told of his royal greatness and splendor as the Jews thrive in exile. I hope you enjoyed the story of Esther. Moreover, I hope you have learnt and are now knowledgeable on many books in the Bible, from our channel. Stay blessed and carry on keeping updated. God bless folks.